Welcome to Haunted Homebodies, where Halloween isn't just a day, it's a lifestyle. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Sarah, and we're your guides through the delightfully dark corners of comfort horror. And now it's time for your bedtime story.
So, for our paranormal story today, we are covering the Estonia Werewolf Trials. Now, most of us have heard of the witch trials, and this occurred right around the same time. So the witch trials were kind of in the late 1600s. I mean, I think it spanned kind of
Okay.
a broader, but when we're like talking about like, say, like the Salem witch trials and when accusations of witchcraft were really running rampant, that was occurring around the same time as this werewolf business. So, as we well know, witchcraft trials have little to do with actual witchcraft or devil worshipping, and a whole lot more to do with, let's say, the persecution of women, anyone who was resisting converting to Christianity, there's the big one, and anyone who basically wasn't abiding by strict puritanical ways of living. Hello, New England. And then I put et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, if you weren't like bowing down to the Christians and being like, yes, I will go to church, and yes, I will button my collar up, and yes, I will do everything that the man says, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, then you were a witch.
That we are always like, no, this thing that could have a reasonable explanation is definitely paranormal. And with the witch trials, we're like, nothing paranormal was happening there, guys.
Well, this story will get this story will get a little more.
Well, this isn't the witch trials. This is the werewolf
Right.
trials, Ashley.
Exactly. But what I'm alluding to is that the Estonia werewolf trials had a lot of similarities to the witch trials, where the motivation for why they were happening is the same. So we're going to get into that, but there is a lot more interesting feedback from the citizens, the Estonians, we'll say. But before we get into that, you have personal experience with Estonia, so tell us all about it.
I spent a single day in Estonia.
Wait, I didn't know that. I thought it was like a week or like a semester abroad. One day. Okay.
One day. Well, this was a few years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I went to Finland with my friend Shay. Hi, Shay, if you are listening.
Hey, girl.
We went to Finland, and now I'm just going to ask our listeners, you pull up that Google Maps app on your phone and look at this. Finland and Estonia are really close together across a body of water that I am looking up on Google Maps right now because I forgot.
The Baltic Sea?
They are right across a very narrow stretch of the Baltic Sea. Yes,
okay,
thank you,
okay.
Ashley.
Yeah.
And you can take a ferry from Helsinki, which is the capital of Finland and where we were staying, to Tallinn, which is the capital of Estonia. It's like a 2-hour ferry. It's like
fun.
A bougie ferry too. It's almost like a daytime cruise ship. Like there's like restaurants and bars and like slot machines, a lot of fun. So we got up really early one morning to take a ferry from Helsinki to Tallinn, and it was my favorite part of the whole trip. Tallinn is this like very old medieval city, and we really spent most of the day in Old Town, which is just like medieval buildings. And when I travel, like that is the thing that blows my mind because we have both lived all over this country, and I get such a kick out of like people in California like talking about like really old houses and buildings that are 100 years old, because in New England we've got houses that have plaques with a year in the 1600s on them because that's when they were built. And then you go to Europe and you're like, this was literally built in the Middle Ages and is still standing. And I think it is so cool and it's so beautiful. And it was also just really cool. The funniest part of Old Town. So like you're walking down these narrow stone medieval streets, these like medieval stone buildings around you. And they've all got shops and restaurants in them, right? And one of those restaurants was just called Texas. The name of it was Texas. It had 2 flags outside of it. One was the American flag and one was the state flag of Texas.
What?
in Estonia. We did not end up
Okay.
going in because we
Come
only had a
on.
day there, and we really wanted to experience
Oh,
actual Estonia.
you gotta go in there and at least look at the menu. I'm so
Well, it was
curious.
Tex-Mex. It's a
Okay.
Tex-Mex restaurant and it has like pretty good reviews and apparently pretty good Tex-Mex food. If I had walked in, all I would have wanted to do was walk in and show them my Texas driver's license. I think that would have been
Yes.
hilarious.
Yeah. And then they also would have been like, why do you talk weird? Then
Yeah, yeah.
you're just a little New Englander. Like,
Not
I
sure
don't
if someone from
understand.
Estonia would have recognized that. I can lean into a
Hmm.
southern drawl, Ashley,
That's true. It does come out every now and again. You lived in the
when I'm
South,
drinking. You mean?
the deep South,
Yeah. I
Louisiana.
love a good y'all.
Cool.
Anyway, Tallinn was delightful. Loved it there. Medieval buildings blow my mind absolutely every single time we see them. I've also zoomed in on Google Maps. It is the Gulf of Finland, which connects to the Baltic Sea. That is apparently what
Okay.
I crossed that day. And
Cool.
everybody should go visit Estonia. I thought it was awesome.
I I really want to. That sounds amazing and right up my alley. And when we first introduced this topic to each other, I was like, is Estonia real? Like, is this was this a sequel to the
Well,
Princess
that's like
Diaries?
really fair. That's oh wait, we
Oh,
talked about it. What is it? What is the princess?
Genovia,
Genovia.
but same energy, at
And you
least in
know
the
what?
name.
You know why same energy? They're both super cozy. Tallinn
Yeah.
was so cozy. We were there in February. I don't know who goes to visit Finland in February. It's a choice. But it was like the coziest little wintry spot. Like every restaurant, every shop we walked into was like the coziest place I've ever been.
Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. Well, that is so fun. Anything else for your little intro here?
That's my probably 14 hours in Estonia.
I love it. I love that it was a day and I was building it up. I
Yeah.
literally, in my head, I think was like, yeah, she did her semester abroad there. Did you even do a
I
semester
did
abroad?
not.
Yeah,
No.
me neither. I'm romanticizing
Yeah.
your
I'd like
life,
to
but
go
that's still
back.
good.
We can go back
Okay, yeah.
together.
We'll
Yeah.
do a fake semester abroad. We'll do a podcast semester abroad with
The
our families.
dream. Yeah.
You never know. The logistics seem
Come on, Evan.
iffy,
You got to
but
go do some temporary science somewhere.
yeah, temporary science. That's in the Middle Ages.
Yes.
Oh man. All right. Well, thank you for that introduction. That was a lovely little introduction. I was like, what's another word for introduction? Okay. So we've kind of set the scene. So we've zoomed in for people on where we are on Earth. I've given you the timeline. We're in the 17th century, so mostly talking about the late 1600s here. Let's talk about the werewolf trials because what the heck? What the heck are they? I have to say, I was expecting this to be relatively simple research. And it took me a long time to wrap my head around the concept of the werewolf trials because of what I talked about at the beginning of them being basically like witch trials, but they just had to
Mm.
like flavor it differently in order
Mm.
to properly target the people of Estonia. Gross.
Oh, it also
That
feels like it's campier flavored.
it's kind of fun. I think just because we are so like well versed in the Salem witch trials and we
Yeah.
know that history so well, have been immersed in
Mm.
that for most of our lives. So to hear about a werewolf trial, I did not know this was a thing. I did not know that this was a thing that we were really accusing people of, uh, outside of like clinical like psychiatric diagnosis, because that still is a thing. But yeah, they were very real. And so while the rest of the world was like wild now about witches, over in Estonia, we had Baltic Germany. So it gets a little confusing too because Estonia used to be, I think it was called Livonia. So I'm not going to get into that because we were crossing over, like there was still, I think, Livonia and then also Estonia, and then it becomes Estonia. It's confusing. But basically, the area we'll just be calling it all Estonia because otherwise, like our heads are going to explode.
Sure.
And it pretty much works for the entirety of this story. So Estonia is being ruled over by the Baltic Germany. They are in control of this region at the time, and the upper echelon, the Christians, were trying to take over, basically. The people of Estonia were largely practicing paganism. I'm going to read the definition of paganism according to the Oxford Dictionary. It is a modern religious movement incorporating beliefs or practices from outside the main world religions, especially nature worship. I think that's a terrible definition. Another definition was like, it's a religion that's not Christianity. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Like, Oxford Dictionary was like, it's something other than what the Christians do.
So it's kind of like the definition is dependent on who's saying it.
It's so, yes. It's like, which lens of history are we looking at this through? But from what I know about paganism, it's something that as an adult, I was like, okay, this is a religion that I can get behind because it's kind of like there are many gods and they're all like natural beings, right? Like, and we're worshiping the earth, we're worshiping the wind, and there's this magic that connects all of us, and it's mostly used for good, and there's just a few people who use it for bad. So basically the Baltic Germany was coming in. They were trying to diminish the practice of paganism and push Christian ideology on the Estonians, but paganism was still like going on in the back door. They were having like speakeasies, little pagan rituals or something. They weren't being secret enough because basically people just weren't joining the Christian faith. They weren't going to service. They weren't becoming like good old God-fearing Christians. So they were trying to come up with a way, like, how could we get more people to convert to Christianity? Because, religious freedom. Who needs that? I wrote, that's bogus. I was trying to be like cutesy. In other parts of the world, this was basically the same thing that was happening. But witchcraft was the go-to punishment for those who resisted conversion. But the reason why this is the Estonia Werewolf Trials and not the Estonia Witchcraft Trials is because witchcraft wasn't really a thing. Like, I was trying to get to the bottom of it. I was like, I don't really get it still. But it almost seemed like semantics. Like, they couldn't accuse people of witchcraft because the people would have been like, what's that? you know? It would have been like, they couldn't have like confessed to it because there wasn't really that ideology, because they were all pagans. They didn't necessarily have the same words of like heaven and hell. Like, they had those concepts and eventually started using those words to describe, I think, like what their beliefs are. And if anyone is a practicing pagan, and like I will just like say as a disclaimer, I don't fully understand the religion. I'm just going off of based on what I read and trying to piece together what the heck was going on. But they basically didn't have, like I said, that witchcraft in the way that the Christians were describing it, but they were very immersed in like werewolf culture. Werewolves were a big part of their lore and their history. So basically they were like, we can't really accuse people of witchcraft directly, but we can say, hey, you're a werewolf. And a lot of them will be like, yeah, I am. And then they can try to spin it and be like, and that means you're making deals with the devil. So it was this fine line that they were working. Like, the pagans did believe in magic. Like I said, they believed mostly in that magic was good and that it was inherited and that could be practiced and cultivated. It wasn't like, well, you can just go make a deal with the devil and that makes you magic. It was like, we're all magical. And then some of us are really magical. And then some of us become like much more magical. And then there's the bad guys called the sorcerers. And they, they're doing evil. They're doing like bad, dark magic. So there was that element. So then we had to come in and try to be like, okay, so that's what you believe. Let's try to twist it to fit our narrative so we can persecute you. Classic. So let's talk a little bit more about werewolf culture in 17th century Estonia, because that's a thing, right? Very cool.
I love this, by the way.
Right? It was fascinating. It was like very confusing, but also so interesting. And just like a cultural moment where I was like, you guys are cool.
Yes.
Right?
Cultural moment indeed.
Right? Like, people in New England, they're just like, there were a few interesting people, like that's it, and they were persecuted for being interesting. They're like, witch! Whereas here they're like, yeah, we're all werewolves pretty much, so. Not all, but like a chunk.
It.
So let's get into it. So werewolves as we think of it today, right, are like some sort of like man slash beast, whether like we most often think of it as a man who or a woman. Let's try to be somewhat inclusive, but really it's usually men who have been bitten by another werewolf. The full moon comes out, and then they start transforming into a werewolf and like eating everybody.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's the werewolves as we know it. So
Yep.
that was like kind of true for the Estonians too, but there was a little bit more to it. So there definitely was this element of like part man, part beast. And we'll get into the like were they transforming into a wolf? Because that gets a little bit interesting down the line here too. But the really interesting part to me is like we consider werewolves to be monsters primarily, except for like Jacob Black in Twilight. Maybe he was like
Definitely not a monster. Team
right,
Jacob.
yeah. Heartthrob. Yeah, we were definitely Team Jacob. But anywho, so aside from Stephanie Meyer's interpretation of a werewolf, we generally think of them as pretty harmful, and it's like it's
Yeah.
literally a curse, right? It's a curse to become a werewolf, and then you do bad boy things when you are a werewolf. So the werewolves in Estonia, they were known to eat livestock. There was some stories that I avoided about them eating children. It's pretty bad. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's always like baby animals and then like baby humans. And I'm like, could we just eat the regular adult animals and humans or just like
Yeah.
become a vegetarian? Anyway, they were. So I avoided those stories. But the stories that I did not avoid were another little twist on werewolves, not as destroyers, but as vigilante protectors of our realm. Okay.
Actually, it just keeps getting better.
Right? So there was not a lot of documentation around the Estonian werewolf trials, at least that was not written in a language that I could read because I can only read English. So I think that there is probably more history and lore, but in terms of what is available, it doesn't seem like they were like really serious into documentation around this time in Estonia, but there's some. So I'm gonna give you, I'm getting a little lost here. So yeah, this isn't like in Salem where, you know, there have been lots of stories, there's lots of documentation of what went down. It was pretty meticulously detailed, at least from what we can tell. We know like who was accused, why they were accused, what happened after, how wrong it all was. You know, it's very laid out there. Whereas like I kind of had to like piece the like what actually the heck was going on here from different stories. So I want to tell you two different werewolf trials that I found descriptions of to kind of help give us context as to what was going on. So there is one that's pretty famous. It is the trial of Old Thiess. I'm going to say that that's how you pronounce it. I'm not confident on that. Um, but they actually have like a transcript of this trial. And
Oh.
what I learned from reading the entire transcript was that transcript, well, it's a document. Basically, what I interpreted it as is them. It was fascinating, one, to read about a trial. Because
Hmm.
do we think the US legal system is fair or right? And is it more just like who has the advantage, who has the better lawyer, who can tell a better story? Yes. But there is at least a degree of like, let's present evidence. Let's try to have some impartial third parties. This was like,
Yeah.
let's put powerful men in a room, ask someone a question, and keep asking them until we get like the answer. And then, you know, okay, this won't go on the transcript, but like, then let's torture them and see if we can get them to say it. And then maybe they still don't say it. And then we're just like, yeah, but you meant this, right? And then they kill you. So, you know, it certainly wasn't a great
Awesome.
process. But also, in terms of the transcript specifically, it was a lot of like, here's what the judge, whatever judge was speaking, said. Like, here's what the person on trial was asked. And then it was just paraphrasing. It was like, he said something like, no, I'm cool. You know, it wasn't like quotes. Like, you know, like it seemed like his
Okay.
energy was like sus.
Yeah.
So that was kind of how but it was still super interesting and gave me a lot of, it put me like really in the moment, you know? I was back in
Hmm.
1691 Estonia with Old Thiess, who is awesome. So let's talk about him. He was put on
Please.
trial at age 70. So this is why we're calling him Old Thiess. Like, this is 1691 and he is 70 years old. Like, that is incredible. Like, go him. I do not think the
Yes.
life expectancy,
I know.
very few people were making it to 70. So he was accused of lycanthropy, which I'm going to read you the Google definition of that because I
Okay.
kind of was like, that's just being a werewolf, question mark. So it kind of has a dual definition. So you could use the word lycanthropy to describe the clinical disorder where someone believes that they can transform into an animal, often a wolf. So it's like that belief that like I'm a werewolf, but it's more of just a delusion of sorts. It also can be used to describe the mythological concept of a person transforming into a wolf or other animal, usually a werewolf, right? So it's describing a delusional way of thinking, but then also like a here's where that delusional line of thinking may have come from because there are all these stories and all of this lore that seems really real to a lot of people. And
Yeah.
at this time, it was like very real.
Okay.
Old Thiess was accused of lycanthropy, and he was also accused of I don't know if it's no, I'm like second guessing lycanthropy. I don't know. If people are coming here for me to pronounce words right, they've already known that
They
that
should
ship has
know
sailed.
better by now.
Right? Yeah.
For
Not my
sure.
jam. Not my jam. Accurate research, I try. Pronunciation, more of a struggle. Anyway, so he was accused of lycanthropy. We'll just keep saying it the way I've been saying it. And also, quote, other prohibited and impious acts. Because that's specific,
Impious. Don't
right? Trigger
love
warning.
that.
Trigger warning. Yes, we know that the Christians have entered the chat on this one. I should say the Christians of this time, they were all about being pious. So interestingly, during the trial, Old Thiess was like, yeah, I'm a werewolf. Like, you got me. You know?
Love him.
Yeah, this wasn't like a no, like I didn't do that. How dare you accuse me of that? He was like, yeah, I'm a werewolf. And so the judges were like, okay. And so they were like, are you crazy? Old Thiess, are you crazy? And this is just like, this is how a trial works. They're just like, it's just a conversation, and we're just like being like, they're asking questions and seeing if they believe him and then prodding him repeatedly.
Okay, yeah.
There's so much repetition. So they asked him if he was, quote, mad, and he replied, no, like his health had never been an issue. He was like, no, I'm not crazy. I'm a werewolf. So they were like, all right, kind of like tell us more. So he went on to tell them how he went to hell in werewolf form and that he was able to access hell from an entrance at the end of a lake in the swampy area. He's describing a very specific spot in town. And I don't know if I interpreted this correctly because it was a little hard to like put the pieces together here without much context.
Sure.
But it sounded like it was like at the swamp, the entrance to hell seemed like it was associated with one of the judges? Question mark?
Oh. Like
Maybe that
he was
people in
just like
power are
inferring.
evil? I don't
Oh,
know.
he's great.
There was something there where I was like, oh, there basically was like it was in so and so's backyard. That was what I took from it, but I don't know if that's accurate. But anyway, he's describing this very specific location where there is a gate to hell. And so the judges were like, why has no one seen this then? Like, show us the gate, okay? And he was like, oh, well, the gate can only be found by, quote, someone who belongs inside.
Whoa.
Yeah. So he's like, yeah, no, you couldn't see it if you weren't meant to go to hell or like didn't have that ability. So he's just like taking it to the judges. I'm loving it. So they're asking him, how do you become a werewolf then, Old Thiess? And he's like, well, let me tell you. He did not claim that he would morph from a man to a beast, which I think is really interesting. In Estonian lore, the way that you became a werewolf is that there's these magical wolf pelts, and you put on your wolf pelt, and then you become a werewolf by some sort of magic. And there are people who give these people the wolf pelts, and then they would just like hide them under a rock, keep them secret, and then they'd go to their rock. You imagine in Twilight if like instead of like transforming on the fly, he just like scurried over to the rock and like put on his little cloak and then
Would
poof,
it have been
turned
any
into a
more
werewolf.
ridiculous?
Nope.
No.
Nope, but I was totally thinking about that. I had the exact same
It's
thought. I was like,
great.
yeah, that would have been pretty much just as weird. And then I wouldn't have to
Totally.
think about them being like nude in the forest when they transformed back as much. But
Yeah.
anyhow,
Sounds like you did think about that though.
that came out when we were teenagers,
Yeah.
okay?
Sure did.
So he was basically like, yeah, we've got the wolf pelt. And they were like, he said that he got it from someone and he was very vague about it. And the judges were like, you have to tell us who gave you the wolf pelt because like they're in big trouble too. And he would not say who it was. He was like, nope, not telling you. They kept pressing him to the point where he just was like, you know what? I did transform into a wolf. There's no pelt. He just totally changed his story. He's like, I'm done with you. Okay, so
Wait, I want to watch this as a courtroom drama movie.
Right? This needs to be an episode of Law and Order.
Yeah.
Okay. So he changed his story, and then they were asking him, like, tell us more about what happens when you become a wolf. So he said he wasn't the only werewolf in town. I don't think he, I don't have to say I don't think he didn't give up any of his friends. Let's put it that way. He obviously was not throwing anyone else under the bus for sure. So he was like, when we're a werewolf, we run around town, we eat mostly baby animals, sad face. And when the judges were pressing further, they're like, and then you consort with the devil? And he was like, no, don't do that. And they just weren't buying it because that's their whole point, right? We're putting him on trial in order to say, but then you were making a deal with the devil, right? Because then they can say, oh, it's witchcraft. And then, according to the law, that's big no. That's like now we get to literally burn you at the stake. Oh, but he was very adamant. He was like, nope. I have to read what I wrote here because it's silly. So then the judges asked if he wasn't in fact in cahoots with the devil, then why in tarnation was he and his little werewolf pals running around in hell? It's a kind of a fair question.
I am curious to know the answer.
Right? So, he went on to elaborate kind of his relationship with the devil, as at least the archetype of the devil in hell. I'm not really sure on like how these terms were coalescing with the differences between different religious beliefs, but we're trying to just keep it simple and use those terms. So Old Thiess told him that there were sorcerers. Okay, we've talked about the sorcerers. These are the bad boys of the magic world in paganism. Okay. Yeah. So they were working with the devil. They were going to hell. They were bringing like crops with them, basically. And this was cursing the land. So if the devil had the crops, then like the crops wouldn't grow the following season. So the werewolf's job was to go into hell and to like fight the sorcerers and get the crops and bring them back. And then if they brought them back, then like there wouldn't be famine. Like the crops would be fine. They'd grow fine the next year. So this is like their job. They're like little vigilante justice. Could
be
wolves.
An entire movie series based on this.
It's so good.
They're
and
so
he is
cool.
This man is on trial, Sarah.
Yeah.
He is on trial and he is just like straight face being like, then we go to hell, we get it back. Like we're, you're just laying this out. Like, this is the realest thing in the world to him. So basically it was their job to go prevent the famine. And he then went on to say, like, I don't know what about that makes you think that I'm serving the devil. I'm obviously serving the god, the god or gods, whatever. And
the
I think
people.
paganism, it's yeah. He's like, so I'm taking things from the devil. I am like straight up against him. There are the hellhounds in hell serving the devil. And he's basically saying like the werewolves are the god's hounds. Like we are like dispatched by God to go like protect humanity, basically. So, of course, they continued to press him and say, like, yeah, but, like, what about when you made a deal with the devil? Like, every 5 seconds. And he was just like, no, like, I didn't. So the final judgment came, and because he continued to adamantly deny, like, he had a very clear story, he was very clear that he was working against the devil, not with him. So the judge was just like, okay, so he's delusional. It literally says that he's delusional in his judgment handed out. because this is what I wrote, because apparently admitting to being a werewolf was madness, but admitting to being a werewolf and a devil worshiper was real and punishable by death. Make it make sense.
Yeah.
So, because he had admitted to being a werewolf, he was totally open about that. Yes, I'm a werewolf. No, I don't worship the devil or make deals with him. He was whipped and then banished from the land, but he remained alive. So he
All
kind
right.
of was giving us this precedent for if you say you didn't make a deal with the devil, then hopefully you're fine.
Yeah.
So that was in 1691. We're going back a little bit in time to 1651. That's the end of Old Thiess. Let's give it a moment. Just Old Thiess.
Thiess. What a guy.
Love ya.
What a guy.
Love ya. Like, we got to take a minute because, like, what a story. What a story. Loved reading about that, and he just seems amazing, and I hope he had a peaceful end, maybe like cozy in his little wolf pelt somewhere.
Yes.
Very glad that he was spared. But now, let's go on to the other werewolf trial that I'm going to cover. So this is about 40 years prior, 1651. This is the trial of an 18-year-old. So just like, I was like, what do I call him? Like a kid, a teen, a man? Like, I guess technically you're a man. But really, I mean, to me, 18 years old.
As a kid.
You are not an adult. Exactly.
Yeah.
So his name was Hans. He was accused of being a werewolf. He too was like, yeah. Yeah. I've been a werewolf for a couple years. So he admitted to lycanthropy and to hunting in the area. So he was like, yeah, like, I'm really sorry. I did, probably like eat some of your cows, etc. So in his trial, I didn't find a transcript of this, so I didn't get as much detail, but it was pretty similar. They were, for some reason, I'm about to explain the reason. They were prodding him like they did to Old Thiess. Like, did you transform into a werewolf, or did your soul enter a werewolf? And the way that Hans described it, he stated that after he would become a werewolf, and then when he came back one time, he had a bite mark. So it's as if him as a wolf had bit his human body. So he was like, I think like my soul is entering and becoming like a wolf, also with a wolf pelt. And he didn't name a name of where he got the wolf pelt, but he said he got it from a, quote, man in black.
Oh.
I don't have any more information, but I enjoyed that detail.
Seems nice and vague.
Right? And creepy. Just creepy enough.
Yeah.
So the judges were like, what do you mean your soul entered like a pelt? Like, they wanted more elaboration, and kind of similar to the Old Thiess. They just kind of kept talking him in a circle and like trying to get him to explain something that sounds like it's just like, oh, there's just magic. Like, we're just telling you that there's magic, and that is how we become a wolf. So he later admitted that when he was a werewolf, he felt like a beast. Like, he didn't feel like he was his human personality. So they basically called him on this inconsistency, being like, well, if your soul is becoming the wolf, then wouldn't you feel like a man still? Wouldn't you not feel like a beast when you're a werewolf? And he was like, oh, I don't know. So because of this, they basically twisted his words for this like very esoteric concept, and one that they're like, you're crazy if you think this, but also if you think about it the wrong way, then it's witchcraft and then it's real. It's ugh. So this one really made me mad, because they basically said that he must be transforming, because if he is becoming if he feels like a beast, then he's just turning from a man into a beast, and in order to do that, of course, he had to make a, guess what, Sarah? Deal with the devil.
Oh God.
Of course. So they kind of, in his case, like Old Thiess, they just kept asking, and he just kept saying no. And they're like, well, because he didn't admit it, we can't convict him. Whoever was judging this poor kid was just like, well, no, because you said this, then that means that you made a deal with the devil. You were transforming into a wolf, you made a deal with the devil, and he was sentenced to death. They killed him.
Oh no.
I
Poor
know.
Hans.
I know. So this just really illustrates. It's about 40 years apart. In Old Thiess, this happened after. So, it shows which is something that we see in the justice system all the time, just kind of how so drop an F-bomb. How freaking willy-nilly it is, where it just depends on
Yep.
who's asking the question and who is putting out the sentence in terms of what the determination is. And obviously, like I said, there's more checks and balances now and ways to avoid literally just it being a judge who's like in a bad mood and being like, no, you're a witch.
Yeah.
Or someone in
Yeah.
power could still say that and burn him at the stake, whereas Old Thiess,
Yeah.
the judge or judges were at least relatively fair to be like, well, he didn't admit it and we don't
Yeah.
have any proof, so he can live. Just be whipped. So nice.
Yikes.
So it kind of illustrates the attitudes that I was trying to to illustrate for like what was going on at the time in
Yeah.
society. So you can see how why they went towards werewolves because compared to the witch trials or like people are just in general like, no, I'm not a witch.
Yeah.
People in Estonia were like, yeah, I'm a werewolf.
I love it.
Like,
And they're
kind of a
proud
lot.
of the work they were doing.
Yes, they were doing good work.
Yeah.
And then we can also see in these trials that very clear line that they're drawing between being a werewolf and witchcraft, and that doing witchcraft was making a deal with the devil, and that was the big deal. Like they were really
Yeah.
literally trying to make people God-fearing Christians, and these Estonians were just like, nah,
Yeah.
we're just not. Like, stop putting words in our mouth. That's literally what it seems like they were doing. And unfortunately, as we saw the difference between these two cases, if you admitted to witchcraft, you were burned at the stake. That was what happened. And if you admitted to being a werewolf, you were more likely to just be like whipped and banished. They were just like, go be a werewolf somewhere else. We don't want you eating our kids and our crops. Yes. And fourth, kind of no matter what you say, they're most likely going to accuse you of witchcraft and kill you anyway, which we saw in the witchcraft trials. It didn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like there was a trial. Everyone was guilty
Well,
going
yeah.
in.
And
There
then
was
if they weren't sure,
no justice.
they'd throw you into the water with stones attached to you, and if you floated, you were a witch. And if you
Right.
didn't,
Yeah.
you were dead.
Oh, yeah. That is such a good illustration of how ridiculous it is. It's like either way, you're dead. There is
Yeah.
no getting out of that scenario alive.
Yeah.
Zero. Unless you are a literal witch and can like poof and
Yeah.
go somewhere else.
In which case you
That
probably
would
wouldn't let
be
yourself be in that situation in the first place.
nope, probably not. So to wrap up on this story, during this period of Christianity-induced witch hunts in Estonia, there were 18 different werewolf trials. There were more across like all of history, but kind of in this condensed latter half of the 17th century. So dozens of Estonians were accused of being werewolves, destroying local properties and livestock. And yeah, like they were literally just accused of being werewolves, which is so. I mean, the witches were one thing, but just like accusing dozens of people of being werewolves. And then the kicker that I love about the story is that a lot of them were like, yeah, I am. So
Love it.
like I said, documentation on many of these trials. There's just not a lot out there. We don't know like all of the names, all of the background, how many people admitted to being werewolf, how many people were convicted, but we do know kind of the socioeconomics of what was going on, and they won't surprise you. So people being accused were almost exclusively, it was called peasants. We all kind of know what that means. So it was the lower income class. I don't even know if we call it income, just the peasants.
Just the peasants.
Many of those who were accused were older. So, they're trying to wipe out the old wise people, and they really sent this point home because they actually were really targeting a group known in Estonia as the cunning folk. So this was a term that they used kind of for like their elder healers or like kind of the wise old like folk story kind of magical old people who would just like use their years of wisdom and knowledge of the earth and probably a little sprinkle of magic to help. And they were like literally targeting these old people and saying that they're evil, which is sounds like couldn't be further from the truth. And sorry, you go.
I was gonna say, they were amazing. Like, I
Right.
have like full faith that these werewolves were good people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that there is still an interesting element of that animal, uncontrolled, like predatory piece of being a werewolf. Like, I think there still was a degree of shame and regret and lack of control that they were describing when they were a werewolf. They're like, yeah, like I did do some really bad things and I wasn't trying to do it, but also like I had to be in that form in order to fight literal sorcerers.
Yeah.
So it was like a really interesting discussion of like vigilantism because they also were doing
Hmm.
bad things. Like I said, there were parts of the story that I didn't go into detail about, like eating children in the town. Like they were just eating creatures and children. Like,
Huh.
they were causing destruction. And then there was also this subtype that was like defending the universe.
Okay. All right.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit gray, but
Okay.
still, like I don't think the cunning folk, the little witchy elders, were doing anything wrong. Maybe the ones
No.
who were werewolves too had a
Yes.
couple bad days and did some bad things, but yeah, very interesting. So one demographic fact that I think is interesting in contrast to the witch trials that we know a lot about, men were accused almost as frequently as women. Maybe because of it being werewolves and not witchcraft, but it was like
Yeah.
almost 50-50 in terms of accusations. So it wasn't that this was just specifically targeting women, it was targeting everybody
Yeah.
um, in the lower class. So how does this end? Why does this end? Why are we not still having werewolf trials? In 1699, in Estonia, torture was officially banned.
All
Torture
right.
was commonly used as a way to get people
Such
to
a good Christian
confess,
value.
right? Yeah, it's like, let's get people to confess. Coerce? No, 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 no. Confess. They really did it. They just needed a little help. So go figure. People weren't really admitting to something that they didn't do when they weren't being tortured. Oh, I still think Old Thiess, tortured or not, I don't think they needed to torture Old Thiess for him to say he was a
It
werewolf.
sounds like he was just
Oh,
singing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think some of them were like out and proud, I'm a
Yeah.
werewolf. But yeah, a lot of people were just tortured, and they're like, "Were you, doing this? Were you doing that?" And then eventually they just wanted to stop being tortured, so they were like, "Yeah." And so when this stopped, then a lot of the the accusations stopped, and there were only 2 werewolf trials in Estonia that were reported after that. That is the end of today's tale.
I loved it. Thank you. I'm so happy to know about this part of history.
Super interesting. I love when history just sounds like fiction, you know?
Truly, it does, and
Right?
somebody in Hollywood has got to pick this up. Just use it as like a inspiration, but
I
you can give
agree.
us something better than the werewolves you've been giving us.
I know. I know. Because a lot of
Yeah.
werewolf, so I've seen An American Werewolf in London. A lot of people love that movie. It's not for me. I think a lot of werewolf movies tend to be really gory. Like, I don't like The Circle of Life. So, like, I don't want to see people getting, like,
Hmm.
ripped up, or animals getting ripped up. Whereas, like, that's one thing I appreciate about Twilight is, like, that's not what's
No.
happening at all. It's a very safe space for werewolves. We're not being traumatized by Twilight, but there's got to be an in between, right? Where we can make a really
Yes.
fun fantasy. I would love to see, yeah, that vigilante werewolf aspect
Hmm.
where they are fighting bad guys. Because you think of them like fighting like orcs or something, like in Lord of the Rings. That would be really
Yeah.
cool. Whereas like eating children, I'm like, we should leave the
Yeah, let's
first
not do
story
that. Let's
out.
not.
Will not be watching that. No one wants to see that. No one wants to talk about it, even though I mentioned it a bunch of times because I was traumatized just by the concept.
Fair.
but
It seems super
but yeah,
fair.
there's something there.
All right. Bye.
My
Thanks for listening to another episode of Haunted Homebodies. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
and remember, when in doubt, just stay home.